3 weeks into the Premier League season, Burnley sit in the relegation zone with no points to their name and a -5 goal differential, despite having played only 2 of their 3 scheduled matches. For a Burnley club that torched the Championship last season, has a manager tabbed as a potential successor for some of the best managers in football, and did a good job of solidifying its club this summer to prime itself for Premier League battle, more was definitely expected out of the gates. But things are not always what they seem. The schedule matters. The opponents matter. And in this department, Burnley has gotten screwed early on. We're going to talk about what's happening with Burnley and why, despite what it looks to be a rough start, they're going to be just fine. Next, here on Pints and Punditry. Burnley is going to be okay, folks, but it's going to be a rough going for a month or so until we really get rolling in the Premier League season. Before we get rolling any further in this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button for me down below, like the video while you're at it, follow us on Twitter at TotalFIFACM, and of course, let me know all your thoughts down in the comments sections. How you feeling about Burnley? How do you think this is going to turn out? I want to get your thoughts. Burnley got dealt a rough hand in its return to the Premier League, and then it was made worse because Luton Town can't hold enough fans in their stadium yet, which is just bizarre, but all this only matters in terms of the narrative and won't have any bearing on the end of the season, so long as everyone can keep their heads and Burnley management doesn't rush and do anything rash. Let's look at the early season Premier League schedule that the reigning championship winners were dealt, because it wasn't pretty. This isn't exactly a welcome back to the Premier League kind of schedule. Opening against the European champions in Manchester City is almost a cruel way to welcome a team back to the Premier League, and it guaranteed that they would end week 1 without any points. But then the really bad luck set in. Week 2, they had a matchup against Luton Town, which should have been easy points for them, but it was postponed because Kenilworth Road, Luton's home stadium, isn't ready yet. It's the home of Luton Town. They need massive upgrades this offseason because they weren't up to Premier League standards, and those renovations aren't done yet. Now, what I don't understand is why this game wasn't just moved to Turf Moor and then you flip the reverse fixture back to Kenilworth Road, and that would have made sense, and then Burnley doesn't have to cram another game in later in the season, same thing with Luton. But regardless, the potential early season points that a match with Luton Town offered to a Burnley team coming off a Manchester City drubbing were now kicked down the road. Now they'll get those points eventually, hopefully for them, but right now it leaves Burnley with no points 2 weeks into the season. And then the real fun begins. Next up was Aston Villa, which is a game where there are points to be had for them, but that's hardly an easy opponent, as Unai Emery has this team, they ended last season very strong, and they're off to a good start, and they've made some additions, and they're currently sitting in 7th place. This was admittedly a chance for Burnley to get some points, and they did not take advantage of it, and that's on them. And it's worth noting that despite any unfortunate scheduling, any early season struggles will fall at least partially on their shoulders for not capitalizing on what little opportunities they've been given. But at the same time, Aston Villa being only one of 2 winnable games in your first 7 doesn't exactly inspire good form, and that's what Burnley is facing. The loss to Aston Villa is where we pick it up in real time, with Burnley currently sitting in 18th place. They've got just 1 goal scored in 3 games versus 6 allowed. But moving forward, it does not get better. Next up is a Tottenham team that is in good form under new manager Ange Postecoglou. And at least that one's home at Turf Moor, but after that they've got to go away to Nottingham Forest. Forest is a stronger squad than most people realize, and they gave Burnley a tough midweek run as the Clarets were able to survive and advance in the Carabao Cup 1-0 over Forest, so they have to hope for a repeat performance there if they want to have more than about 5 points under their belts before the beginning of October. Because after Nottingham Forest, it's Manchester United, Newcastle, and Chelsea in succession, rounding out a monstrous start to the season that could potentially wreak havoc on the mental status of both Claret fans, players, coaches, and management. They've got to be able to get their points against Nottingham. They missed the opportunity against Villa. They got to get something. So what does this all mean? Well, ideally, nothing. The beauty of the Premier League is that each team plays every other team twice, home and away, so the strength of schedule doesn't exist by season's end. Everybody plays the same schedule. But they don't all get there in the same way. And Premier League history, particularly recent history, is littered with examples of clubs who have made managerial changes because their team wasn't where they thought they needed to be at that given time of the season, without taking into consideration things like the teams they've played, the teams they have left to play, having games in hand, or any of the other sort of wacky scheduling nuances that take place throughout a crowded football schedule. Now, I don't anticipate Burnley sacking Vincent Kompany simply because he's too good of a manager and he would be unemployed for less time than it's taking you to watch this video. But it is the Premier League, and the threat of relegation is very, very real, and it makes organizations do dumb things. So stranger things have happened than a team like Burnley getting panicky and firing Kompany. All it takes is tremendous pressure from the fan base or the availability of another strong managerial candidate who's showing some interest, and that's the sort of thing that makes clubs make bad decisions. But if Burnley management can keep its head, there shouldn't be a problem. Over the last decade, the threshold for ensuring promotion has been 38 points. To put it this way, that's one more point than Newcastle was relegated with in the 15-16 season, and that was the highest total any team has been relegated with in the past decade. Essentially, if you can get to 38 points, you get to stay up. So where is Burnley getting 38 points from? That's the big question. Now, in order to play this game, and admittedly it's a flawed game from the start, we have to operate under the assumption that Burnley and everyone else will take care of business where they're supposed to, and they'll lose when they're supposed to. In reality, Burnley will probably steal a point here or there against someone they really shouldn't beat or draw with, and at the same time they'll give a point back or 3 points back against somebody they should handle. But for the sake of argument and trying to project these sorts of things, let's just say that those even out. The games they give up and the games they shouldn't win. Because when they go in your favor, you shoot up the table, and when they go against you, people get fired and teams get relegated. So for argument's sake, let's assume they handle both games against Everton, because Everton's a mess, and they beat Luton Town once and they draw with them once because that's what happened with them versus Luton Town in the championship last year. There's 10 points. It's probably also realistic to assume, at minimum, that they can split with Wolves, Forest, Sheffield United, Bournemouth, and Fulham. These are all clubs that they can compete with, and so a split is realistic. That's 15 more points, which puts them at 25. That means they need 13 more points from their remaining 26 games to ensure safety. That's one draw every 2 games without ever winning anything. Honestly, that's hit or miss. It doesn't give me a ton of confidence, but at the same time, there are some 2-win draws from that group we mentioned earlier. There's plenty of other draws. They're going to get a point here, a point there. At the end of the day, promotion is definitely not guaranteed for Burnley, regardless of their start. But if they take care of business, they're probably okay, even after this minefield of a beginning to the season that they are being asked to navigate. It just comes down to how slow this start is. If they can't get any points out of these first 7 games, and that is a possibility, then they're going to need to sweep a few of these lesser opponents to be comfortable. Your Wolves, your Luton Towns, Nottingham they need to sweep. But if they can steal a draw or 2 out of this tough start and take care of Nottingham when they get the opportunity in this first batch of games, then that should be enough to give them a comfortable spring. We can't analyze it this deep and expect it to come out the way we anticipate, but you get the exercise we're trying to do. It doesn't matter at the end of the year who they play and when. There are 38 games, and they play everybody twice, home and away. So the schedule is what the schedule is. But this rough start could leave Burnley, it could leave them with no points 7 games into the season. That is a real possibility. If that happens, they are in trouble. They're going to need to steal a point or 2 here and there in this gauntlet of a start. But the point here is not to worry, not to overanalyze, and not to write them off simply because they were asked to navigate this minefield of tough games early in the season. This is a really, really difficult start for Burnley, and it's going to lessen up. It has to by default. And other clubs will have to play Manchester City, and will have to play Tottenham, and will have to play Manchester United. Everybody's got to play everybody. That's just how it works. So when we see Burnley sitting at the bottom of the table, we've got to take into consideration the schedule, and we cannot be surprised when they make a mid-season run and get themselves out of the relegation zone. It's just going to happen in a different way than we probably thought coming into the season. I would love to get your thoughts on this. Hit the comment section down below. What do you think of Burnley? What do you think of the schedule? What do you think of me? I don't care. Just hit that comment section. Make sure you subscribe to the channel while you're at it if you don't already. And of course, follow us on Twitter at TotalFIFACM. Thanks as always for joining us here on Pints and Punditry. This is Total FIFA Career Mode.